So we've done all our modelling, we've created the character, we've created some hairstyles, and we've also explored adding some clothing variations. So now we need to switch into Maya and start thinking about applying a good set of UVs which will sort of future-proof the character in a way, meaning that if further down the line on another project we need a character that needs to have more like zombie flesh or a tattoo, or maybe even just stripy tights, we can paint it directly through the texture and we don't have to build extra objects on top. So in short, it's a good idea to take the time now to do the UV setting up and get some basic textures in there to work with. So this is the current model. I'll just hide that camera that was floating around in the background. Now she's looking a little bright, and that's because at this stage when I bring it into Maya, because the viewports are so different, you get a much nicer view of the model. So it's a good idea at this stage to apply some basic shaders and have a look round the model, look at the surface and just do one last check just to make sure she's exactly spot on and how you want her to look. Now as I say, this looks quite bright at the moment, and that's because I tend to use a new plugin. And if we go to renderer, we have our normal plugins here, high quality, viewport 2.0, and also this caustic visualizer. Now if I enable this, as you can see, we've got a render quality viewport now, and we can actually move around it and it updates in real time. And what this is doing, this is basically just, this plugin calculates the ray tracing in the scene. And because I have in my render options, I have final gather enabled. If I just open up my camera attributes, we zoom in like this. If you notice in the eyes, we have actual real-time reflections as well. Go down to our environment. So the lighting in this scene is basically the default lighting and the background colour, which is acting like an ambient light. If we drop that down, you see the shaders do have some ambience on them, but that just gives it a little bit better, it just makes it nicer to work with when you've got an actual render preview that you can physically go in and we can move this around. As you can see, it updates in real time and it's quite fast as well. And like I said previously, we've got the nice reflections in the eyes here. And this allows us to move around the model and just see what it would look like when rendered. So we can see if there are any surface artifacts, any odd bumps or lumps which need addressing. And like I said, these are just basic shaders applied to this. It's just a blend with a simple ramp shader just to give us a bit of a highlight on the outside. But it's just a much nicer way to work. Now this plugin is free for 30 days, so maybe just go and give it a try. Load it into Maya. At the moment I'm running a Windows 8 beta, but there will be a Windows 8 version released soon. You don't need it for this tutorial, so don't worry if you don't want to bother with it. But I just like to throw a model into it, and like I say, it's nice to just look round this render quality image here, and you can just check your model. It's much better than in Silo, and it's much better than using the default quality. So let's get back on track. What we're going to do is we're going to apply some UVs to this character. Let's just open up our UV texture editor. Just bring this down. So these are the current UVs. Not very good, quite rubbish actually. So let's just apply signed favourite material, existing material, sorry. Hang on, it's disappeared off the bottom of the screen. Check them up. So these are the current UVs and they're all a bit messy. So now let's go ahead and start cleaning this up. Now the arms will UV exactly the same, and then mirror the arm across and then separate the UVs so they're not overlapping. The same with the leg. So we may as well go in. Let's turn on that nice visualizer again. Although it looks a bit complex, let's go to default and let's just turn off that texture for now. So let's maybe select that arm there. Just follow that around so we've got a nice edge loop around there. Let's delete that arm. And then what we'll do is we will just detach this arm. Mesh, extract, and that turns off smooth mesh. Obviously we were working on a low resolution proxy. Press number 3 and that gives you back your smooth mesh preview. So the same with the leg. Let's get rid of this leg, like so, and then we'll detach this other leg. Mesh, extract, there we go. Again, press 3. And now let's just isolate the body and let's detach the head. Let's decapitate her. Like so. So we're putting the seam just under here, just to hide that in a way. Mesh, extract again. So turn on smooth mesh again. So for these, let's just go in, let's turn on our texture again. Let's just do create UVs, plane our map, and we're just going to project straight from the front, so down the Z axis. Click project, and that's just given us a starting point for our UVs. So let's take the body first. Let's go back to our UV texture editor. So this is how the body is looking currently. So we now need to dictate some seams so that we can unfold and unwrap her. So for this, I'm going to just create a seam straight down her back, and that will have followed round and up the front of the model. So let's just deselect that, like so, just double check. And then we need to create a seam under here as well, so this area will unfold. Polygons, cut UV edges. And now what's going to happen is this is going to unfold, but we need to create another seam around here. So why don't we create one across the back here? We have to think of areas where it's going to be seen the least. And because these are going to be used for sort of, if you think of them as a model in a way, a supermodel, they'll most likely be seen from the front. If they're seen from the back, then there are ways we can hide these seams. Cut UV edges just to dictate that seam there before I forget. We are going to use basic textures to texture this character. She's going to be dressed most of the time, so it's not an issue. But we just need the UVs in there just to help us get that base colour in, and also if we want to add further textures on her in the future. So now we've dictated those seams, let's select all our UVs, open up our unfold options, and what I'm going to do is unfold horizontally first. So it's only going to unfold across the horizontal axis. Click apply, and that's unfolded the back. Now I'll switch to vertical, click apply, and that's unfolded there. So let's have a look at those UVs there. We are going to get some stretching over her chest, and if you're worried about that, I would say detach this area here and UV this section separately, so its own UV shell, and then that'll allow you to get more detail in there. But to be honest, this type of model is never going to be topless, so I'm not too worried about there not being much detail around here. We're never going to see her nipples basically. So if we quickly look around, you can see we've got a much nicer UV layout, and it didn't take too long. If we wanted to, we could go back into our unfold options, click none, and just see how that works. And that's relaxed this area a little bit more. We could try it on the top too. So all it's doing is just working on the areas that I've got selected. Click apply, Now that's unwrapped that, but also the neck has collapsed in a little bit there. So it's a bit of a balancing act. What we could try and do is deselect these up here. So this is basically leaving these pinned. So it's going to try and relax these selected areas between the areas that are pinned. So click apply again. And that's worked a little bit better. It's unfolded these areas here and kept the neck nice and unfolded. So now you have that basic set UV layout like that. You can go in and use the various tools here, the lattice tool, the smudge tool, to nudge these around and get the exact UV layout you want. But to be honest, that's good enough for me for now. So let's move on to the head. And it's exactly the same process. We just want to dictate a scene. So running up round the head, like so. Maybe cut the seam there. Polygons. Cut UV edges. And we maybe need a seam just underneath her chin. Now what we could do with this is we have a few holes in the model, and when we come to unfold these areas could collapse. So it might be worth us just selecting the edge, mesh, fill hole, just temporarily press G to fill that hole, and I know there's a hole actually at the inside of the mouth. It's fine. In fact, what we might do is just detach the inside of this mouth. So let's just select those polygons there, mesh, extract, and we'll just hide that, and then we can go in and mesh, fill hole. Now we did that because it will try and relax the inside of the mouth and fold it out here, which will widen the mouth area and it will collapse the whole area, so we don't really need to worry about that. So again, we've got our seams dictated. We filled in those holes to sort of keep the shape of those. So let's see what happens when we unfold this. So again, let's start with horizontal because we want to unfold from the back, peeling it out. Click apply. That's done that. Vertical. And that's done that. As you can see, it's not a bad layout to start us off. What you would probably do actually is maybe go in and detach these eyelashes and then fill the hole in the eyes. So let's just undo that, delete that. So this might be a bit tricky. What I'll do is I'll just delete the eyelashes for now, but you should detach them and then reattach them when you're done. So that's much better. The eyelashes, to be honest, will be UV'd and mapped separately anyway. So select those edge rings, let's just select these and delete them. Like so. And then we go back in, mesh, fill that hole, fill that hole, and now let's see what happens when we unfold this. Again, start with horizontal, then vertical, and that's much nicer around the eyes and around the mouth as well. Again, if you wanted to, you could go in and make the ears a little larger because you maybe want a bit more texture detail in the ears, but now you have this basic UV layout here, you can go in and tweak those areas and they're a lot more manageable. And if we look at the UVs on the face here, it's a much nicer UV layout. What you may also want to do is if we delete these temporary holes now, because she's going to be animated and she's going to blink and her eyes are going to close, we want more texture detail in her eyelids. So take the time now to go in and close her eyes in the UV shell. Not in the actual mesh, that's going to come later. But because we know our eyes are going to close, it makes sense for us to apply these changes here now, and then we don't have to worry about them later. So when she does close her eyes, there'll be that extra bit of texture detail in there just to cover those areas. You've probably seen it on some games where the character's eyes close and they've not taken this into account, and you get that horrible stretching texture over the eyelids. So just doing that now, it didn't take long, and that just means when she does blink later, it looks a bit odd in here, but when she does blink, she's going to look much better. So that's basically the torso and the head UV'd. Now we can do exactly the same process with the rest of the model. Separate the hand and the feet, the hands and the feet, use basic projections to get you started, and then use the unfold tools to give you the UV layout that you want. So if I jump ahead, let's unisolate this. Just quickly show you this model here. As you can see, this is all the UVs laid out. We've got the hair done there, which I will show you briefly in a second. But this is the UV layout. Let's look at our UV texture editor. And not only have we been in and UV'd her, we've also created a nice UV layout. So we've got both hands, both feet, both legs, both arms, her head. These are her eyelashes here. I've even separated out her fingernails, because you never know, we might want fancy designs on her fingernails. We have the inside of her mouth down here, but that's all nicely laid out, ready to bake out and ready for us to paint on and apply textures to. And because we've used our checker map, we can see that these grids are a nice shape here, and she just works quite nicely. So that's the body pretty much ready to go. So how do we go about working on the hair? Well, the hair is quite simple really. Let me just, this is a single mesh, let me just detach those. So say we have one model here and we've applied the UVs to that. Let me just go in. Let's just select these two. Let's just isolate those, that's it. So window, UV texture editor. So this is the UV for the hair, and it's just a basic strip. So let's just remove those UVs, just create some generic ones like so. So you've gone in and you've UV'd one strip. Because we know the topology is exactly the same on the others, we can simply just go in to our mesh, or is it edit mesh, transfer, where is it? Just move up a bit. Transfer attributes, there we go, it was there all along. In here we can copy UV sets here, so we've got that set to all. The sample space we're going to change to topology. Select your source, select your destination, click apply, and as you can see, because the topology is exactly the same, it's copied those UVs across. And you can do that for the rest of the strands in your hair. And once you've got your UVs copied across, then you can go in and you can edit these, add in more edge loops, delete parts. Because you've got those basic UVs in place, you're good to go. So you don't have to worry that you've spent ages sculpting the hair and then you've got to go in and UV each section. You can just use this transfer attributes option. If the topology is the same, just to copy across. If the topology is not exactly the same, you can try some of these other options here, but you're not going to get as good results. Keeping the topology exactly the same means that you're going to get exactly the same UVs, and then you can do any further editing afterwards. So there we have the model UV'd. And obviously you need to go in and export your UV your UV map and layout as a texture so that you can start to work on your actual texture maps. And that is what we're going to do next. We've got our UV'd, we've got her hair UV'd. Her clothing, to be honest, you could just do it like we did the torso, a straight projection from the front, create your seams where natural seams would be in clothing, and then unfold those, and they're quite easy to UV, so I'm not going to waste the time demonstrating that here. So with the model UV'd, all we need to do now is look at how we're going to texture her, and we'll do that in the next video.